Alrighty. What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Time Out with Doc and Caveman. As always, you are here with the Fantasy Caveman, my co-host, and myself, Dr. Fantasy. We are rolling along here with our NBA team previews. Today we're going to be talking about the Atlanta Hawks, recapping last season, and then previewing our expectations for this upcoming season. Before we do that, I want to remind everybody to make sure you subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. And I'm going to encourage you, if you're watching on YouTube, to like this video. It helps us out quite a bit. So we'd appreciate that, and we appreciate everybody who's watched. I believe we're a little over halfway through our series now. So we are almost done already for this off season, and then we'll have some standings predictions, and the season's right around the corner. So it really came kind of quickly this year. So getting into the Atlanta Hawks, last season they were 41-31, good for fifth in the Eastern Conference, which was pretty surprising to a lot of people. Lloyd Pierce got fired mid-season. They were 14-20 under him, and then Nate McMillan really re-energized that team, and they went 27-11, which is very impressive under him the rest of the way out. And they made their way to the Eastern Conference Finals, which nobody predicted. If you put money on that, you are very rich right now. A few random stats. They were eighth offensively in terms of efficiency, 21st in defensive rating, which was towards the bottom. But under Nate McMillan, they were 12th actually under Nate McMillan. So it's a little uneven there. They allowed the 12th fewest points per game. And they were the fourth best team at defending the three-point line last year, which is semi-surprising considering their star doesn't play defense, but they've surrounded him with some really.
But but you look at the other guys they have around
Yep.
Trae Young, and that's where you can kind of see how they'd be good at defending the three.
Yeah, and that's what I've mentioned it a few times in other episodes. I think this is the formula to win with players like Trae Young, like Luka, these young offensive-minded players. You need to surround them with gritty defenders who are going to defend the perimeter and be able to make up for what Trae Young is as a defensive liability. So I like the way that they're built. Let's go through their season leaders last year. Trae Young led the way with points at 25.3, John Collins at 17.6, Bogdan Bogdanovic at 16.4, Clint Capella at 15.2, and Deandre Hunter at 15. Rebounds, Clint Capella at 14.3, and then a drop off to John Collins at 7.4. Assists, Trae Young at 9.4. Steals, you had Cam Reddish at the top with 1.3, Kevin Huerter with 1.2, and Bogdanovic with 1.1. Blocks, Clint Capella with 2, John Collins with 1. So, Caveman, as always, who impressed you?
Oh, man. Almost everybody on the Hawks roster impressed if we're being honest. I'm not. I mean, the Hawks have more than Trae Young, just like you keep saying. The Hornets have more than LaMelo Ball. I think we should really be talking about guys. Not that Trae Young disappointed, but there is other guys on this team. The one guy that really stood out for me is Deandre Hunter. Now, it's unfortunate he did get hurt and he missed quite a bit of time last year. I believe he only played around 23, 25 games. Don't have the exact number.
23, yep.
23, okay. But in that time, he averaged 15 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. Was arguably their best defender the entire season. And he really made the jump from his rookie season. His rookie season, he was terrible. And he really stepped it up last year. I honestly think if he was healthy the entire season, I wouldn't be shocked if we were talking about him as a possible defensive player of the year candidate last season. If had he been healthy. Which means going forward this season, assuming he can stay healthy, I think he could be an under the radar defensive player of the year candidate. which given the fact that, like you mentioned, the Hawks are needing to surround Trae Young with all these defenders, I think that just makes the role that he has on this team vital to their championship aspirations, which I think the Hawks reasonably have. So.
Yeah, and Deandre Hunter is definitely the number one for me as well. And I think one of the great tragedies of last season, when you look at players that miss significant chunks of time, I think Deandre Hunter was one of the top ones for me because he really looked, I don't want to say he was going to be a star player, but kind of a guy that he's still
Star
only
defensive
23
player.
years old. Definitely a star defensive player. But he's the kind of guy where offensively he showed you a lot more, and if he continued that progression last season and then continued it more this season, we're talking about a guy that could be a borderline all-star player. So I think it was really disappointing that we didn't get a full season of watching Deandre Hunter. His free throw percentage increased by almost 10%, his field goal percent 7%, which is pretty significant. And as you mentioned, his scoring numbers went down, or it went up, sorry, and with playing less minutes per game compared to his first season. So, we've talked about it with other guys. It's always encouraging when you have more volume and you're more efficient. So that's what Deandre Hunter showed, that he's going to be a really efficient, effective player. So besides that, I mean, I think this was a pretty interesting example of just they played a very solid, well-rounded team game. I mean, when you look at their roster and guys that specifically stood out, I don't know if you can say that when you look at Bogdanovic and Gallinari when he was healthy later on in the season. John Collins didn't really take a step forward, but he became more of just a really valuable high-end role player because he averaged
him and that pick and roll with him and Trae Young. I mean, that kind of that. I mean, that he is the perfect. He is the perfect big man, at least on the offensive end, to play alongside Trae Young.
Yeah, you really can't have a better combination than those two in the pick and roll. And I think that he was pretty much equally as effective as he was the season before. When you look at his numbers, he averaged less rebounds, points, but he was playing less minutes, which a lot of these guys on the Hawks did because this is a very deep team. They were very deep last season, so they weren't relying on guys to play 35 minutes a game because they had so much depth.
Yeah, and I think especially not just last season, but going forward, based on their depth, I think Trae Young's probably the only guy that's going to be in that 33, 35-minute range.
Yeah. Yeah, no one else averaged over 30 minutes a game except Trae Young. Everyone else, even John Collins, was at the low 29s. So I think that you'll probably see him in second. But let's go through their offseason. Wasn't overly exciting on the whole. They had 2 draft picks, which I really think they maximized the value here. They did only 2 picks, but value on both of them. So Jalen Johnson, 20th overall, and then one of your guys, Sharif Cooper, 48th overall.
Man, I'm still he slid big time.
Considering the kind of upside he has, he definitely did. I think there was a lot of people that had him going in the late first, maybe even creeping his way up to borderline lottery, and that clearly did not happen, which I thought it was interesting. So we'll see.
I don't know what exactly happened that caused the slide, but I don't know.
He's in a good spot. Well, I won't say a great spot to begin with, but he'll not a lot of pressure. He'll be coming off the bench, probably playing. He might even start in the G League if we're being honest about it. In the position that he's in here, he'll probably be with how deep this team is, he'll be a borderline rosterable player. Other guys that they added, no huge names. DeLon Wright will play minutes for him. Jaleel Okafor, Gorgie Dang. Your boy, the bubble master himself, Timothy Luai-Cabarrot, had that crazy bubble run with the Nets when they really had nobody because everybody was hurt for them. And then a few guys they lost: Chris Dunn, Bruno Fernando, Tony Snell, and Brian Goodwin. A few guys that played some role player minutes for him. So what do you think of this offseason as a whole? Did they get better? Was it not enough? What do you think?
Not enough is really subjective because, I mean, if based on what they had last season, what do they really need to add to continue on in their journey? They far exceeded expectations, like we mentioned last season. So I think their off season was very fitting, and I think overall they made the right moves. I don't think they needed to do anything like crazy and go out and try to get another superstar to pair with Trae Young or anything like that. I don't think that's the way to go for this team. So I think they did the right thing. They didn't really lose anybody of importance. They kind of kept the core and kept the players that helped get them to where they got last season. So it sucks that they lost one of my former boys, Tony Snell. I just want to throw him. Tony Snell. When it's all said and done, not many NBA fans are gonna remember Tony Snell, but Tony Snell is a dog. He just goes out there every night and just silently goes up and down the court. He had that one magical game when he was with the Bucks where he played 29 minutes and had nothing on the stat sheet. So he's just it's a loss that's really not going to really affect them that much, but kind of one that I still wanted to throw in there. But yeah, overall, their off season still kind of quiet, but I think they made the necessary small moves.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what this offseason tells you is that they're very confident in the core that they have because they didn't make any moves to shake that up. They didn't lose any core guys. Jalen Johnson, I think, potentially could be a core player for them depending on how he develops, but they didn't really do much to move off of what they did last season. I think they were they had to be happy with where they ended up. I mean, they exceeded everybody's expectations, and I think with a superstar player, I think they have championship aspirations in the future. So let's go over their depth chart. We've mentioned their depth a few times, which is impressive. It was my favorite part of their team last season, which is I believe I had them as a 6th seed in the East, which seemed high, and then they finished 5th. So they literally blew everybody's expectations away. So in the backcourt right now, they have Trae Young and Bogdanovic listed as the starters. Behind them, you have DeLon Wright, Lou Williams, Cam Reddish, Kevin Huerter. They'll play. I might as well throw them in with a 3-2. Deandre Hunter is listed as their starting 3 right now. So behind those 3, you got Wright, Lou Williams, Kevin Huerter, Cam Reddish, Solomon Hill, Jalen Johnson, Sharif Cooper if he makes the team. I think that's pretty much it there. In the front court, you have John Collins and Clint Capella right now listed as the starters. I think it's worth noting Clint Capella has an Achilles injury. He's currently questionable for the start of the season, so we'll see where that shakes up for them. Behind those two, you have Gallinari, Gorgui Dieng, Jahlil Okafor, and then a guy who did not do very much. What was he, number 4 overall, Onyeka Okongwu last season, who also is coming off an injury himself. So when you list all the names or count all the names that I just listed, I mean, it legitimately goes like 12 players deep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things where it sucks that he because he's one of my guys. But you mentioned, I don't know if Sharif Cooper makes the opening 15-man roster. I mean, he might, but Yeah, but you mentioned that. I mean, their depth a little early on. If Capella misses the season, misses the opening start of the season, might be a little interesting because then you got Ikunu also dealing with something.
Yeah,
So,
he's not expected back till December. Okongwu, by the way.
Okongwu as well. Okay,
Yeah.
so I mean, to start the season, maybe their depth at the center position is a little questionable because what are you gonna? Georgie Dane's gonna be expected to play a lot in that front court to start the season. Jalen Johnson's gonna be getting quite a bit. I think he's gonna get some solid minutes as well off the bat. But once they get Capella and Okongwu back in that front court, I think they'll be fine. But other than that, love their depth all the way around. I mean, when you got a guy like Trae Young, there's really not going to be many minutes left in that backcourt for anyone else at that, especially at that point guard position. So they got a very capable guy in DeLon Wright, and Lou Williams for that matter, to kind of take care of the rest of those point guard minutes. I imagine whenever Trae Young's not on the court, Lou Williams will be on the court.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're going to be fine there. They got a ton of wing depth. I mean, they got wings up and down. They got wing players all over the place. So now overall, just solid depth. I mean, aside from their front court injuries to start the season, I really have no complaints, and I love their depth overall.
Yeah, I mean, they have all the elements you're looking for. They have a superstar player, they have shooting, they have defensive players in their starting lineup and coming off the bench. They have very capable ball handler for that second unit with Lou Williams. I thought Gallinari settled in really well into his more of a reserve coming off the bench role. He only started 4 games last year, played 51. So, that was a guy that I think people had a lot more hope for him early in his career, but I was kind of impressed, I'll say, with how he settled into his role last season. So yeah, I mean, this team, one of the things I'm kind of interested to see is they were a better defensive team with Nate McMillan, but they were missing their best defender. So I think that's going to be kind of interesting to see defensively how everything lines up. When you have Deandre Hunter, you have a strong defensive minded coach in Nate McMillan. By the way, we didn't even talk about it much, but I think Nate McMillan is going to be a little more respected now. A lot of people put a lot of the Pacers' lack of success on Nate McMillan, but look what happened when he left. They were even worse than when he was there. So I think that Nate McMillan earned quite a bit of respect last year, and they extended him rightfully so this offseason. But I think because that's really the key when you observed the difference under Nate McMillan versus Lloyd Pierce, they were just a much better defensive team. And historically, if you want to make a run out of a championship, you need to be a top 10 defensive team. And they were borderline that under Nate McMillan, and they're already a top 10 offensive team. So when you combine those elements, this is a team that I think is still getting lost in the Eastern Conference because it's so deep and people want to talk about the Bulls and the Celtics have, multiple superstars, and we want to talk about the Hornets and the Heat and the Bucks and the Nets, but I think the Hawks still kind of get lost in that shuffle sometimes. And, I was just thinking of this in my head. What will hold the Hawks back from winning the East? I mean, what do they need to do to win it? I mean, can they legitimately do it? I mean, I don't know. I think one of the things you mentioned their big man depth a little bit. So if you're talking about it, who would be guarding Giannis if they were to play him? Right now with their injuries, I think that would be a tough question to answer. They'd probably struggle to guard Joel Embiid as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of a legitimate reason why they can't win the Eastern Conference. And if we're being honest about it, I don't have a good reason.
I mean, yeah, that kind of obviously that brings into where they're going to finish next season. I mean, and to be honest, I think I still think this is either going to be Milwaukee or Brooklyn's conference this season. Those other teams are really going to have to step their game up and play catch up to both those teams. But after Milwaukee and Brooklyn, I think Atlanta can finish as the 3 seed, if we're being honest. I think they can finish ahead of teams like Philly and Boston and and the Heat and all those other teams. And there's no reason why they can't at least get back to the Eastern Conference Final. I don't see how they couldn't. And as much as it pains me to say it, I do think they have a chance of upsetting Milwaukee. Again, I mean, that Eastern Conference Finals last year was a good series overall, and Trae Young was clearly not 100%, and it was glaringly obvious that Trae Young wasn't 100%. So a healthy Trae Young with another year under McMillan and with another year of improving the chemistry, I don't think they could upset. I don't think they could beat Milwaukee. But at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me if they were able to pull off an upset if that series happened again. But yeah, are they going to win the championship this season? Probably not. I don't think they're there yet. I think they're 1 year away from being like true championship contenders, but they could make a run and easily make the Eastern Conference Finals once again and have a chance at least.
Yeah, and I mean, I think just the reality is the talent level they have just isn't up to the Nets or the Bucks. I just think that's honestly the biggest thing that'll hold them back at this point. And I think a legitimate concern is even when they lost to the Bucks last season, and even in the good series with the 76ers as well, is when Trae Young wasn't on offensively, like who are they relying on? Who's their second option? People talked about that with the Lakers all the time. We have LeBron and AD, but who's your third scorer? I mean, in this case, John Collins is your second scorer, and are you confident in him on a night in and night out basis if you need him to be your top scorer? I think he still has to prove that. I think that he's been consistent the last 2 years, and don't get me wrong, he's a high level borderline all-star player, but when they need a second guy to step up, can he be that guy? I think that's a legitimate question still, in my opinion. And you saw that in the games they lost last season, or in the postseason, Trae Young was not their leading scorer. It was nights that he struggled. So when you're playing the top teams in the conference, you need more than just Trae Young offensively.
You mentioned teams like Milwaukee and Brooklyn. They have certified number 2 options behind their top guys.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think that's a big question for them offensively. But I agree with you. I think that though they could finish anywhere from 3 to 5, I don't want to say surprised, but I'd be a little surprised if they finish lower than 5. If they did finish lower than 5, it'd probably be with a similar record. It's just a matter of maybe there are some teams that jumped ahead of them because they had a better record. But I think that they'll be a similar team to last season. Like I said, I'm really excited to see. And I won't say similar to last season, slightly better. If they have Deandre Hunter with Nate McMillan, I think defensively they're going to be a borderline top 10 team. They'll be fine offensively. So it'll be a good season for Hawks fans. We'll see. I can't see them taking the next jump either and being, making it to the finals. I think there's too many obstacles in their way. And they are still one of the youngest teams in the league. Well, they're kind of creeping up towards the middle more so now, but they're still young and playing together, we'll say, especially with a newer head coach. So I think that's it for the Atlanta Hawks. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you throw us a like for the video. So we'll see you guys next time.